Jonathan Luboff injected the heroin into his left leg rather than fool around with the collapsed veins in his scarred arm. Being right-handed, he'd abused the left half of his 70-year-old body so horribly, every fix had become a nightmare for the trembling old actor. He checked the dose twice. He didn't want to get sick or nod out before the party. His career was already in ruins. More bad publicity, especially among the Hollywood insiders, would finish what pitiful little he had left in the way of work. Luboff waited a few heartbeats before pulling the syringe out. It was a good, clean hit. His leg warmed, and he felt the sweet numbness climb into his aged torso. A few moments later, his brain reacted, and he experienced the familiar dreamy lightness that he'd spent the better part of his twilight years chasing. He had considered suicide again today, but he procrastinated, hoping against hope that one of the big studios would call. The truth was, he contemplated suicide nearly every day now, until he'd had his fix. Then it faded from his conscious mind like the ice melting in his morning glass of scotch. He had a monkey on his back that would have killed a younger man, but Jonathan Luboff was tough as nails. He'd already lived the equivalent of 3 lives in the space of one. From the heights of stardom to the depths of despair, his roller coaster karma never slowed down. He looked in the mirror. The face that looked back at him was as frightening as any monster or madman he'd ever played in the cinema. It was the eyes. Now sunken and carrying a wrinkled mass of flesh around them, they still gleamed with an intensity that made most people shrink from his stare. Luboff's eyes penetrated. His eyes were diabolical, mad, passionate, and searching. They sent complicated mixed messages of pain to those who chose to look into them. The windows to a troubled and unhappy soul, they glared back at him from the mirror. Even with the pupils constricted to mere pinpoints, they still expressed enough raw anguish for 1,000 lifetimes. Once, they had looked out from the movie screen at millions of paying customers. From his classic 1930s films, which made him a matinee idol, to the cheap, shoddy Landis Woodley productions of the 1950s. Those eyes compelled generations of moviegoers. As a young, darkly handsome leading man, women fought over him. He'd been married 5 times, bought and sold numerous Hollywood mansions, starred in over 100 pictures, and was known the world over. Now, in a low-rent apartment in West Hollywood, he waited for the smack to deaden the pain of living so he could once again pull off the illusion of life. Luboff staggered backward, bounced off the wall, then collapsed heavily in a metal and plastic kitchen chair. How the chair had made it from the kitchen to his bedroom, he didn't know. It had appeared there last week, migrating across the filthy expanse of the living room floor to where it now supported his emaciated frame. His breath came shallow, the room spun. He knew he had to get up and get ready to attend the party, but his limbs refused to cooperate. Luboff, the consummate actor, knew how to force his body to do things it didn't want to do. He'd been doing it for years. Desire was the key, desire and pacing. He was still dressed in his bathrobe, a garment he wore constantly unless he had to go out. His black tuxedo with tails hung by the door, still encased in plastic from the dry cleaners. Landis had taken care of that chore for him. He had also purchased a box of decent cigars so that the star of his latest movie wouldn't appear too destitute. Luboff's taste in tobacco ran to the cheap, unpleasant-smelling varieties he bought at the drugstore. Luboff felt the rush of the narcotics sweep through his system, wiping away the failures and the humiliations that had accumulated since his last fix. The great Luboff sighed. He lurched from his chair and bumped into the dresser. His shoulder collided with a framed movie poster proclaiming, "Luboff at his most frightening, the story of a curse that wouldn't die, experienced the horror of the mummy's brain." It rattled against the wall, but didn't fall. Jonathan steadied himself. This was Lubov at his most frightening right now, far more disturbing than anything he'd portrayed in that or any other film. His hands were clumsy and huge as he opened the cigars and attempted to light one. Everything seemed small and delicate, and he felt as if he were wearing gloves. He fumbled with the cigars, managing to unwrap one and put it in his mouth. Lighting it was another story. The matches fought him, frustrating him to the point of mental exhaustion. At last he struck a match and brought one of the fine cigars to life, puffing it frantically. His hollow cheeks worked in and out like a bellows as he fought to keep the ember glowing. Lubov's eyes burned like distant warning signals. He swayed and leaned, his shrunken, quivering body as unsteady as his mental state. As the plumes of bluish smoke filled the air, he felt warm and weightless. The skeleton of a smile crossed his lips. He stayed, leaning across the dresser, cigar in hand, for almost 30 minutes. His legs had locked into position, and instead of falling, as he often did after a fix, he remained upright, his mind wandering. He vaguely remembered Landis Woodley telling him he'd arranged for a starlet to accompany the actor to the party. Could it have been a dream? Lubov's mind swam. His sex drive had shriveled away years ago, and now the only vicarious thrill Lubov got from beautiful women was in the status of their proximity. His hands shook all the time now, so he could no more caress a shoulder or a breast than he could perform brain surgery. For the great Jonathan Lubov, the grave beckoned. Eventually he donned his tuxedo, slipped a worn vampire's cape over his shoulders, and straightened his back. A comb slicked his greying hair back, and a little theatrical makeup added colour to his pale visage. He looked in the mirror and compared this latest reflection to the one he had beheld earlier. It was improved. Not greatly, but some. The heroine had left him dazed, and he stayed in that dreamland between worlds even after the doorbell rang, signalling the arrival of his car and driver. He walked slowly to the car, in character, high as a kite. Landis Woodley's house was lit up like a nightclub. Cars lined the street in front on both sides. Neighbors complained bitterly to the police, but nothing came of it. This, after all, was Hollywood on Halloween, a town and a holiday made for each other. People in costumes paraded past the gawkers. There were dozens of Draculas and Frankensteins, handfuls of mummies, and a small army of sexy witches. The guest list included over 100 names, many from the horror film business. The stars were Jonathan Lubov and Devola. Landis stood by the front door and welcomed people by filming their arrival on 16mm film. When Devola and Albert Beaumont drove up in their hearse, the flashbulbs popped. Once inside, Devola played the room like the pro that she was, posing and vamping for the cameras. Most people didn't know or recognize Albert. Davila herself knew that the delayed reaction to that would be worth its weight in gold. Wait until the world put two and two together. The Satanist and the horror show girl. Lubov's entrance came off a bit less splashy, but every ounce as electric. The limo wheeled up to the house and ejected the fragile actor and his young cohort. Their arranged dates trailed behind. People rushed to greet them and get a closer glimpse at how bad Lubov looked. He drove them off with his eyes. One level stare, and they were repelled back into the faceless crowd. Landis and Jonathan embraced, cigars puffing, and exchanged pleasantries. Woodley was pleased to see that the old man had controlled his dose to manageable proportions. Tad Kingston stood by impassively. His hair, of course, was perfect. Landis had hired photographers to photograph the celebrities, knowing that some of the pictures would run in various newspapers and magazines and thereby promote his movies. In this way, he could not only control the dissemination of information, but he would own the photos. Landis Woodley loved publicity. Plus, he had a few surprises planned. Buzzy Haller and Roberta Bachman entered arm in arm and went straight to the bar, where Buzzy began the night-long project of trying to get her drunk. She thwarted his efforts by sipping a controlled amount of champagne, pacing herself and making Buzzy crazy. Roberta knew how to take care. When Neil Cassidy arrived, the upstairs bedroom became the reefer room, and guests came and went all night. Bongo music drifted into the hall along with the sweet scent of burning pot. Poetry was being recited, people were expressing themselves. Neil was a magnet for the beats. He spent hours pontificating about Kerouac's real mission, the message of Zen. Everyone listened with the rapt attention of tea-heads. Lubov himself spent at least an hour in there, inhaling marijuana and making small talk. His date, the actress Lillian Mansville, abandoned the old junkie 5 minutes after they arrived. The cigar smoke made her sick, she complained. Before she dumped him for a male fashion model from Santa Monica, though, she made sure that they had their pictures taken by every available photographer in the place. Neil Bugmere, wearing a baby blue chiffon prom dress and white pumps, attracted as much attention as the celebrities. He laughed and danced, enjoying the limelight. Halloween meant a lot to him. It was a chance to show the world his most inventive side with total legitimacy. He circulated freely, leaving a trail of astonished looks and rolled eyes. As per his instructions, he talked about the new script to anyone who would listen. In the center of the house, next to the great spiral staircase, where the ceiling stood as high as the structure would allow, was a 20-foot-high guillotine. It dominated the wild landscape of the party like a huge antique curiosity. The blade, perched high above the crowd, gleamed mirror-like and appeared razor-sharp. In conversation, Landis explained to anyone who would listen that it was real, an original French Revolution model. He claimed that he'd purchased it from a broker in Paris for a movie he would eventually make about Marie Antoinette, headless beauty. People looked up at the blade with ghoulish fascination. Landis explained that this particular guillotine had been in service for many years and had the blood of hundreds of victims soaked into it. This instrument of death, he declared, must be respected and feared. It's probably haunted. Partygoers stared up at it all night, wondering what happened when that heavy blade was loosed. They could almost see it in action, the headless bodies jerking spastically while the heads thumped into a bloody wicker basket. In general, folks gave it a wide berth as they passed, but they couldn't help but look. When the shivers ceased crawling up their backs, they edged closer, eyeing the blade poised above them, a graphic reminder of Landis's monstrous imagination. Buzzy introduced Roberta to Landis, and he promised to star her in his next movie if she would go for a walk with him around the grounds. She declined, but he persisted. At some point during the evening, he paid Buzzy $100 for the right to steal his date. Her cigarette girl costume was drawing the wrong kind of attention, and she now felt uncomfortable. She draped her jacket over her shoulders to dampen the effect. Roberta's modesty made an impression on Landis, and his desire for her increased in direct proportion to her rejection of him. "Come on, you've got to see the treehouse," he insisted. He pointed out the window to an elaborate building perched in an old oak tree. "That's the 4th time you've asked me," Roberta replied, becoming annoyed. "It's a special place. You've got to see it." "You're not going to leave me alone until I go out there and see your stupid treehouse, are you?" Landis smiled. "Nope. All right, I guess I have to, but the only way I'm going out there is if my friend Laura goes." "Laura Grutner? The costume designer's assistant?" "Sure, the more the merrier, I always say." "And Buzzy." "Why Buzzy?" Because he's my date. They climbed the ladder and entered through a trapdoor in the floor. Buzzy made the girls go first so he could sneak a peek up their dresses as they ascended. There were 3 windows in the treehouse, all shuttered. Landis insisted on opening all 3, the last one affording a beautiful panoramic view of the city. The 2 girls watched as he unlatched the shutters and folded them back. Framed in the window, backlit by the lights of the city below, was a body hanging by the neck. It pivoted slowly in the slight breeze. The face was discolored, the lips blue, and the tongue lolled grotesquely out of the mouth like a huge purple slug. As the body swung into view, Landis shone a flashlight in its face. Laura screamed, "My God, it's Fred! The key grip!" Landis shouted. Roberta felt the champagne rise in her throat and knew she was going to be sick. She looked down at the trapdoor and the ladder below with trepidation. Her eyes went back to the dead man, his face now fully in view as Landis's flashlight illuminated the terrible grimace there. Then Roberta's legs turned to rubber as she saw something that scared her beyond reason. The dead man's eyes snapped open, the purple tongue curled back, and an ugly smile split his unearthly lips. The mouth opened, and a voice from the grave crackled, "Hey, baby, how about a little kiss?" Roberta screamed again and bolted for the trapdoor. She was through it and down the ladder in a matter of seconds, Landis right behind. Buzzy stayed above in the treehouse, laughing maniacally. Roberta bent over in the bushes and vomited. Landis stood behind, quiet and concerned. He waited respectfully while she emptied her stomach, then offered her a handkerchief as she straightened up. Their eyes met, hers wild and fearful, his strangely excited. "What was it?" She coughed. "A joke, I think." "What?" "A sick joke, that's all." Roberta looked at Landis with undisguised disgust. He winced. She held her gaze for several seconds, then turned abruptly on her heel and began to walk briskly away. "Hey, wait a minute," Landis shouted. "Don't talk to me," Roberta said with icy conviction. "It wasn't my idea. It was Buzzy's." "You knew?" Her angry eyes surprised him. It wasn't the reaction he'd anticipated. "Yeah, I guess I did." "You're an asshole, Landis Woodley," she shouted and began to walk away again. "Are you leaving?" She answered by walking faster, up the incline toward the street. "Laura's still up there," Landis said quickly. "What about her?" Roberta stopped and turned to face him. "Oh, what's he got planned for her? More fun and games. You guys are really sick." Roberta heard Laura's voice calling, "See? She's all right." "No thanks to you." Laura ran after Roberta, her face still wet with tears. They embraced, Roberta staring daggers at Landis over Laura's shoulder. Then the 2 women turned and marched up the hill. "Wait, where are you going?" "We're going home." Landis hurried after them. "I'll drive. Stay away from me, I'm warning you," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "How are you going to get home?" "That's no concern of yours." Landis watched her go. From back in the treehouse, another scream rose. Buzzy was having some more fun with another guest. Inside the house, Albert Beaumont was explaining the aspects of Satan in South American Indian cultures to Sol Kravitz when Landis and Buzzy re-entered the house. Fred, the hanged man, swilled champagne and jammed pretzels in his mouth, the rope still trailing from his neck. "I'll hang myself every half hour. You'll love it," he boasted. Devila danced with Lubov while the cameras clicked away. Then, at midnight, all the lights went out. "Don't panic, folks," Landis called out. "It's probably the fuse box. We'll have it fixed in no time." As soon as Buzzy and Landis disappeared into the cellar to make repairs, a nervous pall settled over the crowd. The old house became terribly uncomfortable in the dark. The guests huddled together, speaking in whispers. The mood went from celebration to consternation in a few short moments. Almost as soon as the two men disappeared, strange things began to happen, and the guests began to grow increasingly uneasy. First, in the great fireplace, which had been cold all evening, a fire sprang up spontaneously. A gasp went through the crowd, followed by nervous laughter. "Good trick," cried one of the special effects people. Then some torches along the wall of the stairwell, which most people assumed were fakes, ignited with a surprising whoomp. A few women gasped. The leaping fires threw unsettling shadows across the room. At the center of it all, the guillotine stood tall. The fires burned in pagan ritual all around it. "Bravo!" one of the cameramen shouted. "Landis Woodley, a master." People gathered in the light of the torches, drawn to the guillotine. The rest of the guests shifted uneasily on their feet, looking up at the blade. The edge gleamed ominously high above the floor, lit by the dancing flames of the torches. The staircase, now swathed in sinister half-tones, reclined like an evil creature, curled around the beheading machine. The wrought-iron filigree became a demonic face in the shadows. Buzzy Haller emerged from a door behind the guillotine and waved to everyone. "Almost fixed," he chirped, his cheerful banter in stark contrast to the mood of the guests. "It's just a matter of a fuse. It shouldn't be too long. In the meantime, have you been admiring this beautiful piece?" He ran his hands along the rough wood beams of the guillotine. Buzzy was drunk, but he wasn't slurring his words yet. In the early stages of intoxication, he was invariably entertaining and engaging. "It's a genuine antique. Mr. Woodley paid a small fortune for it. It will be the centerpiece for our next film, Headless Beauty. Shares are still available, by the way." Someone in the back of the room giggled. "Seriously, this is the real thing, folks. Comes complete with curse." "Why didn't he just have one made?" a woman's voice shouted from the back of the dark room. There was a smattering of nervous laughter. "Ah," Buzzy replied, "a good question. Perhaps Landis himself should answer that." At that moment, Landis entered through the same door Buzzy had, a small Gothic, round-topped aperture located halfway up the stairs on a landing behind the guillotine. It was almost like a secret passageway. "My technicians are working on the lights. They should be back on in a few minutes. Were you curious about this?" He put his hand on the guillotine, directly in the path of the blade, where the head would have been locked into place. "Be careful," a woman shouted. Landis smiled. "No need to worry. The blade, although razor-sharp, is locked in place with 4 thick bolts. There's no chance of it falling." "Someone wanted to know why you didn't just have one made," Buzzy reported. "I can answer that question with another question. Would you want to own a copy of a great painting when you could have the real thing? You see, I had a rare opportunity to purchase this historic piece in Paris last year." Landis paused and looked around the shadowed room, slowing his pace for maximum dramatic effect. He spoke as if reading from a script. "The price was right, a bargain actually. It seems the previous owners wanted to dump it quickly. They thought it was haunted." "Haunted? Surely you don't believe that?" a man's voice challenged. Landis's smile never wavered. The entire line of questioning amused him, and he instinctively began to milk it for all it was worth. "Who knows what the spirit world is capable of?" another man answered. He stepped forward out of the throng of people and looked up at the gleaming blade. His eyes sparkled. It was Albert Beaumont. He was dressed in his all-black satanic priest's outfit. A silver pentagram pendant hung from a chain on his neck. He waved his hand dramatically at the looming spectre of the guillotine. "This machine is for beheading. The removal of one's head from one's body leaves the soul, shall we say, confused. Those poor creatures who were its victims left this world rather quickly and against their will. Their spirits may indeed linger here, attached to this device forever. Landis nodded. Our esteemed guest has hit the nail directly on the head. The question is, how could it not be cursed? If this blade could speak. His voice trailed off, and his eyes rose to the razor edge. Imagine the things it could tell. In my opinion, the curse makes it even more valuable, more of a collector's item. If I could be so lucky as to capture a real ghost on film, well, we could all retire. Let me demonstrate for you how it works. He approached the machine casually, touching it now as if it were nothing more than a hat rack. Ghosts or no ghosts, it's a hell of a thing, isn't it? Albert answered in the affirmative. Named after Dr. J.I. Guillotin, a physician who thought it would provide a more humane method of execution, the guillotine is a formidable piece of equipment. The blade is weighted and extremely sharp. It runs along this track and severs the head cleanly into this basket. Landis pointed to the appropriate features. They say that the severed head lives on for a few moments after it has been removed from the body, and that it is actually aware that it's falling into the basket. During the revolution, there were always a few heads in the basket. A gruesome harvest, eh? Were the heads buried separately from the bodies? Albert asked. That might have had an influence on the hauntings. I couldn't tell you, Landis replied. Want to see how it worked? Without waiting for an answer, Landis walked around behind the machine and placed his head in the yoke. The guests gasped. Be careful, Albert warned. If this machine really is haunted, well, just be careful. Nothing can happen. Before Landis could finish, the blade came down, slicing his head off with no more effort than a paring knife moving through a carrot. When people looked up and saw the blade beginning its descent, they screamed. The whole thing seemed to happen in slow motion. Landis's headless body jerked away from the yoke, a gout of blood issuing from his neck. It stood before the crowd, the screaming never stopped, then reached into the basket and retrieved its head. Albert Beaumont was speechless. He stood stunned while the headless body of Landis Woodley held the trophy high and shook it. Then it turned and staggered through the door. A trail of blood marked his path. Screaming and shouting filled the room. A moment later the lights flickered on. Buzzy Haller watched as several women fainted, men dropped their drinks, and one person became sick. The lights revealed their astonished, frightened faces blinking at one another in the harsh glow of the electric bulbs. Too stunned to move, they stood around rubbing their eyes and wondering what they had just witnessed. Albert Beaumont was the first one to laugh. 7. Did you see the expression on Lubov's face? Davila laughed hysterically. They were in the hearse being driven home, sharing a bottle of brandy. When the enormity of Landis Woodley's pranks revealed themselves, a new level of respect among the horror community sprang up. The guy may have been a maker of B-movies, but as far as parties went, he was A-class all the way. To pull off a prank like that required planning, expertise, and true devotion. He would go to any lengths to scare people, and he had succeeded. Davila loved it. She'd seen the guillotine trick before. It was a standard, but never before had she seen it done with such believable subterfuge, such elaborate groundwork. Landis Woodley was obviously cut from different timber than the rest of the men in this town. He's got guts, vision, she thought. Albert Beaumont thought so too. The brandy had lubricated him to the point where he'd actually been able to put some moves on Davila. She was attractive beneath her ghoulish makeup. Albert found her tacky, vampirish countenance a turn-on. Her pale skin and slinky black dress were alluring to him in a way that Davila would have been alarmed to understand. Then he began to tell her about South America. He explained it all to her in a casual way, as if he did this sort of thing every day. She received it in the same spirit. "I find that a little hard to believe, Albert." "Yes, it's fantastic, I know, but every word is true." She leaned forward and batted her eyes, letting her impressive cleavage perform its magic. "How about a little demonstration?" "Of course," he answered immediately, anxious to impress her and take her interest in him to a new level. The driver parked the hearse in the driveway of Albert's modest, two-story San Fernando Valley bungalow. Thora was still awake when they entered, watching TV with her friend, a sullen, quiet, overweight girl. Thora jumped up and ran toward them. The friend stayed on the couch, watching them with petulant shyness. "Wow, Davila, I just loathe your show," Thora gushed. Suddenly her father wasn't so boring and predictable. "Thank you," she replied in a normal voice. Thora hadn't expected that. She half expected Davila to use her television voice and say, "Darling, I want to drink your blood." "Thora," Albert said sternly, "I think it's time you and your friend went upstairs. It's way past your bedtime." "Oh, Daddy," she replied, "I'm in college now. I'm grown up. Besides, Carla's parents let her stay up as late as she wants." Her friend, the quiet Carla, looked away quickly. Albert laughed. "Maybe so, young lady, but in certain cultures, children who disobey their fathers are beaten until they're well into their 30s. Thora sighed. "We're beyond that, I think. This is 1957. Our society is much more enlightened than that." "Don't be so sure," Albert said firmly, then turning to Davila. "Thora is a first-year anthropology student at UCLA." Davila looked at her approvingly. "How wonderful. You must be so proud." "I am sometimes," Albert replied, looking into the living room where Carla feigned interest in the television show. "Does that mean I can stay up?" Thora asked her father hopefully. "No," he answered. The finality of his voice was convincing, and Thora knew she had been defeated. She could see that Davila and her father wanted to be alone. She signaled to Carla, and the two of them walked dejectedly toward the stairs. "Good night," she called out as they disappeared around the first landing. "Good night," they echoed. "Teenagers," Albert sighed. "They're the same in every culture. Would you care for some brandy before I show you my church?" "Church?" Davila asked. "Of course. Freedom of worship is guaranteed under the Constitution." He led her to the dining room and poured her a generous glass of brandy. She drank it without a hitch, and he filled her glass again. They drank in silence, each wondering about the other. The quiet of the house was accentuated by a ticking clock in the next room. It was past 2. Albert was beginning to feel the effects of all the booze. The room spun slowly, Davila's smile captivated him, and he desperately wanted to impress her. After an appropriate amount of time, he put down his glass and took hers gently from her hand. He put her glass next to his on the table and licked the sweet residue from his lips. Then he turned, took her into his arms, and kissed her passionately. "Come with me," he whispered. Albert led Davila through the house, into the church. It used to be a family room before he'd modified it into a soundproof, light-proof fortress. The heavy oaken doors closed behind them with a meaty click. Inside it was quiet and dark. Subdued light illuminated just enough for her to see the alien landscape inside the room. As normal as the rest of the house was, this room was peculiar. Davila looked around in amazement, her eyes drawn to the ram's skull on the wall. A red-painted pentagram covered the floor. The altar at the rear of the room was covered with black cloth. the same black cloth that sealed the windows. Curious items hung from hooks along the walls, whips, hoods, black robes, knives and torches. Devila's senses tingled. The occultism she toyed with in her shallow public life was nothing more than a game compared to this. She knew that. She also knew that Albert was as real and serious about his belief as any Catholic priest could be about his. God in heaven, the devil in hell, these were concepts that everyone agreed upon. Albert Beaumont sought to prove the one by proving the other. He dimmed the lights and lit a bank of colored candles. Their faces began to glow. Devila's black eyeshadow and pale makeup stood out dramatically in the half-light. Shadows danced on the wall behind her, casting strange messages. She batted her eyes, letting the elongated lashes dip and flutter seductively. Her yearning for him increased. Albert gazed at her as if she were naked, sending bolts of excitement through her chest. The chemical reaction between the two of them seemed to detonate as soon as he lit the candles. The uneven light heightened their desire. The chamber closed in around them. Something brushed against her leg and she jumped. A large black cat jumped onto the altar. "Oh, that's Mephistopheles. He's a big nuisance, but harmless." From a secret hiding place behind the altar, he retrieved the tuning forks. It was little more than a converted liquor cabinet with a wooden door set in the wall. He held them out to her, and she wanted to take him right then and there. He smiled. The forks glinted and glowed, pulsing with invisible power. He gave them to her, and she took them hesitantly. "They don't look like any big deal," she said. "These can open the gates to hell?" Her voice, husky and low, filled the mysterious chamber like smoke. "Yes," he whispered, "they can." Devila handed them back to Albert, who took them reverently. He walked across the room to the front of the altar and hung them on a wooden hook in such a way that they would be able to resonate freely. Devila's eyes sparkled with anticipation. What would this man show her? Was he serious about opening the gates of hell, and if so, shouldn't she be afraid? Somehow she felt safe, as if Albert's dominating presence would protect her no matter what happened. Besides, he was not afraid. He acted as if he knew exactly what he was doing. He made sure the tuning forks were hanging in precisely the way he wanted. Then he turned to her and spoke. His face was electric. "This is not magic, black or otherwise. It is not any sort of occult hocus-pocus. It is the actual manifestation of a demon. A demon man has called many names. The devil, Lucifer, Mephistopheles, Belial, Beelzebub, Asmodeus, Apollyon, and of course Satan. Since time immemorial, men have called to him, to conjure him to do their bidding, to gain his power. But now I, Albert Beaumont, have discovered the ancient secret, the absolute truth." Devila swallowed, her heart pounding. The low-cut black dress she wore rose and fell with her breathing. She looked from his eyes to the tuning forks, men back again. Taking a striker made from the leg of a hoofed animal, he paused and let the crushing strangeness wash his feverish brow. He spoke again, his voice hypnotic. It compelled her, and she became further aroused. The very evil of the room itself, of Albert's claims, of the tuning forks, brought her pitch higher. She felt a dampness come over her, her ears tingled, she felt lightheaded. "I want to show you something incredible, something that no modern civilized human being besides myself has ever seen. Something so fantastic that you will not believe your eyes. Something that will make you understand that the universe is nothing like you thought it was." He waited for her response. All she could muster was a hoarse, "Okay." "But first," he continued, "you must swear, that what you are about to see will never be repeated to anyone, at any time, for any reason." Devilla smiled wolfishly, beads of moisture glistening on her upper lip, just above the smear of her wine-dark lipstick. "For any reason?" Albert nodded. "Yes, darling, there are those who would pay you for your eyewitness account, and I will not stand for that. So, if you plan to go to the newspapers with this, I'll refuse the demonstration and take you home." She looked at him as though he were crazy. "Jesus, you're serious, aren't you?" Now it was Albert's turn to smile. He looked at her in a superior way and gave a quick nod of the head. "All right, show me." The aftermath of Landis Woodley's party was a horror show. Most people had left by 5 cows a.m., and the cleanup had begun. It was a scene of utter desolation in the living room. Empty bottles, cigarette butts, confetti, vomit, discarded bits of costume, broken glass, and someone's pants were all scattered about the floor. The rug had been destroyed, one artistic guest had drawn pictures on the walls, and in the kitchen a candle had burned down and started a small fire that burned the back door. All in all, a success, thought Landis. Damage was within acceptable limits, and the cops had not showed up. The core elite gathered downstairs in the screening room for some after-hours libations. Neil Bugmere and Deborah Deluxe made a pot of coffee, and Landis sipped his cup thoughtfully, still savoring the guillotine illusion. The fake neck was uncomfortable to wear, and he'd only had to use the detachable head for a few seconds, but it was worth it. Tomorrow it would be the talk of Hollywood. The great Romano, a washed-up magician and carnival sleight-of-hand artist, stood up and raised his glass of champagne. He wore his usual costume of threadbare white tie and tails, the same one he'd been wearing since vaudeville. Other people, sporting a plethora of beverages from coffee to bourbon to soda water, followed suit. Romano's bombastic, irritating voice rose to a crescendo as he waved his arm around the room. "Dear friends," he started, "I implore you, a toast." The glasses, mugs, and bottles went up. Of the 8 people in the room, all of them participated. "A toast. Are you with me?" Everyone considered Phil, the great Romano, to be full of hot air except Landis, who seemed to have a soft spot for the old carny. He was old-time showbiz, a living piece of vaudeville. "I am usually known for my predictions, prognostications, and prophecies, and as you know, my success rate is 87%. 87% wrong," shouted a drunk Buzzy Haller. Everybody laughed except Romano. 87% right, corrected the silver-haired huckster. "Why don't you guess his weight?" someone joked. There was more laughter. Romano cleared his throat. "As I was saying, tonight I make my boldest prognostication. Based on a thorough astrological investigation and in conjunction with the reading I got from my always reliable tarot cards, I predict success for Landis Woodley's next picture." There was polite applause. Landis smiled. Romano continued, "To the man who lost his head tonight, I give you Landis Woodley." He raised his glass high. "A toast." "Hear, hear," they all shouted. Landis stood and tipped his coffee mug. "Thank you, and here's to all of you who make it possible." Buzzy Haller stumbled to his feet. His speech, slurred by the alcohol, was almost incomprehensible. He was a bad drunk, given to violent antisocial behavior at his worst. Landis knew that tonight, for some reason, Buzzy was out of control. "Jess, a minute. Jess, a goddamn minute." He lurched from side to side, reeling into Neil Bugmere, who caught and steadied him. "Take it easy, Buzz," Neil said gently. "Get your fucking hands off of me, you faggot," Buzzy shouted. "Buzzy," Landis began to say. "Shut up. All of you shut up. Listen to me, you bunch of fucking losers. I got something to say." The room quieted. Buzzy swayed from left to right, front to back, his eyes crossed and his mouth drooling. Landis considered stopping Buzzy, but decided to just let his friend do whatever he was going to do, and then pack him off to bed, by force if necessary. This ain't the movie business, this is the bullshit business. We ain't making movies. Nobody could make movies on the budgets we got. It's bullshit. You hear me? Bullshit. The last word he screamed at the top of his lungs. I'm sick of it. The fucking scripts this fruitcake writes are crap. The acting is crap. The direction is crap. The distribution is crap. The reviews are crap. It's all crap. It's a big, fat, fucking piece of crap. No one said a word. The faces all looked away. Buzzy continued, bellowing at the walls, throwing his head back and howling like a mad dog. Remember the flying saucers ending in haunted saucer? I threw a fucking paper plate at the camera, for Christ's sake. A burning paper plate. Is that filmmaking? Huh? The poor motherfuckers in the seats paid to see that. Can you believe that shit? They paid to see a couple of burning paper plates. Shit, they could have done it themselves at home. Landis stood. He leveled his gaze at Buzzy. Buzzy stopped talking and leered at his best friend. They didn't pay to see burning paper plates, Buzz. They paid to see a lot more than that. They paid to see the illusion of flying saucers being destroyed by the heat rays of a hopeful dying planet. They paid to see Tad Kingston shoot down the aliens, whether they were paper plates or $20,000 special effects. They paid to see the magic. They want to believe, Buzzy. They want to dream. And that's what we sell 'em. We sell 'em nightmares. We sell 'em illusions. And you ought to be pretty damn proud of what we do, 'cause only a few people in the whole world can do it. Buzzy looked at Landis with one eye closed. Neil caught him as he slumped backward and laid him on the rug, careful not to bang his head. Hoyt Lovejoy stepped forward. A swashbuckling actor from the early days of talkies, Hoyt was a proud, vain, macho leading man, gone slightly to seed. He'd appeared in 2 Woodley productions. He looked at Buzzy, passed out wasted on the floor, and sneered, "Who says my acting is crap? Get up, you little shit. Get up or I'll crack your fucking cranium." Buzzy opened one eye and said, "Chuck you, Farley." Hoyt reached down and hefted Buzzy up by the front of his shirt. Hoyt held Buzzy in a standing position for a moment, cocked his fist, and punched Buzzy in the face. Buzzy flew back into Neil Bugmere's arms like a rag doll. Hoyt leaned over him and shouted, "Had enough? You little turd. Don't you ever call me a crappy actor again, you hear?" Buzzy was out cold this time. 8 Landis Woodley carried Buzzy Haller upstairs and laid him out on the couch. He needed Neil's help to do it. In a few moments, Buzzy was noisily sleeping it off. Landis returned to the basement screening room with Neil a step behind him. "How can you put up with that guy?" Neil asked. "Buzzy's all right. He just has this massive Hollywood paranoia, you know? He thinks the whole world's out to get him." Neil grunted. "Well, it is, as long as he keeps acting like that." Landis paused on the basement stairs and said, "I know that Buzzy's a little nuts, but damn it, the guy's my friend. He's loyal and he's brilliant. You know that ending for Saucer he mentioned? The one with the paper plates? Yeah? Well, that was pure Buzzy. I don't know why he's so ashamed of it. All he did was work with what he had, which was zip. The fucking guy makes something out of nothing, and he's acting like it's the end of the world." Neil looked sad. "Paper plates and gasoline?" "Yeah, and the gas came from my car, so actually all he had was the plates. So he created an ending, saved the movie, and saved my ass. The investors were going to pull out the next morning, and I'd have been ruined. I guess I owe him, you know? If he has a problem, then I'll try to help. It's only fair." But he hates that scene, Neil said. You heard what he said. He didn't mean it. That scene typifies what we do. We make something out of nothing. Art from paper plates, from garbage. Look, nobody's proud of that ending, but shit, we pulled it off. There's something to be said for that. Neil shook his head. You're too sentimental. The guy's an asshole. They descended the stairs. On the way down, they ran into Jonathan Luboff, sitting on the bottom step, slumped over. He too appeared to be in bad shape. Oh shit, what next? Neil asked nobody. It's a goddamn sanitarium around here. At some point during the evening, Luboff had scored and shot some more smack. Now he was stretched out on the stairs, nodding out and drooling. Jonathan? Landis asked. Are you all right? Jonathan looked up, his pupils pinned. Jonathan. He stared into Landis's face, his haunted eyes boring wormholes. Landis felt a chill. No one on earth could be a bigger Jonathan Luboff fan than he, and he was thrilled to have the opportunity to work with the veteran film great. Yet Landis knew that this was the end of the road for Luboff. Once, Landis had succeeded in getting Luboff checked into a drug rehabilitation clinic. They kept him there for over 2 months, while the old man fought a legion of tenacious and powerful personal demons. Landis did what he could, but Luboff did the suffering. Sometimes it seemed like the old fucker didn't want to be saved. In Landis's petition to the Screen Actors Guild for financial and medical assistance for the aging actor, he'd pointed out that Luboff had once been a major star, a proven box office winner who generated millions of dollars. They acknowledged that when they turned him down. Hollywood traditionally turned its back on has-beens, casting them out like old shoes. Like shoes, faded stars washed up somewhere, no longer worth the money it cost to repair them. Luboff had been all that and more, a classic crash and burn story with a bitter twist. Tad Kingston, with leading lady Deborah Deluxe in tow, found Landis and Neil standing over Luboff. How are we going to get him home? Tad asked. He can stay here, Landis replied. Christ, I'm running a halfway house for these loaders. I got Buzzy on the couch and Luboff on the stairs. I wonder where he got the junk, Deborah asked. Good question. If I knew, I'd kill the guy. Shit, can't they see what it's doing to him? He's a mess. I thought tonight we could drum up a little publicity for him. You know, jazz up the next movie. But he spent most of the time upstairs getting whacked. Landis sighed. He tilted up the old actor's chin with a hand so that Luboff's faraway eyes were looking up. What am I going to do with you, Jonathan? The glazed windows to Jonathan's soul looked past Landis, off into the distance. Landis let the head drop. I hope he can keep it together for the next picture, Neil said. Deborah put her hand on Landis's shoulder and whispered in his ear. Come on, there's nothing you can do. We'll carry him up later. Let's have some coffee. They entered a basement room that passed for a den, and talk soon turned to the next movie. Everyone was anxious to hear the plans. Come on, Mr. Woodley, tell us about the new one, Tad asked. Tad and Deborah were particularly excited because this time they would receive star billing, along with Luboff and Hoyt Lovejoy. They had paid their dues, and in Landis Woodley's world, when you worked hard and played team ball, you got rewarded. You got to keep playing. Money was slim, but Landis kept you working. That was the important thing. Everyone in the room made some sort of living off Woodley Productions. You really want to hear about it? Landis smiled. We all do, Deborah answered. The others nodded. Outside, the sun was coming up, but down in the basement of Landis Woodley's house, midnight hung eternal. His voice, racked by a night of too much booze and too many cigarettes, unwrapped the story of Cadaver. It's a beauty, Neil here came up with a pretty decent script. You know, I've always wanted to shoot in the LA County morgue. It's cheap, and it looks great on film. I had Buzz go down and check it out today, and it's all set. The challenge was building a script around the morgue. That's why Neil was such an important part. Neil stood up and took a bow. It was really nothing, he crowed. Of course it was my idea, finished Landis. Neil shut up immediately. Landis took a sip of coffee and shook a Pall Mall out of a maroon soft pack. He lit it with a wooden match and exhaled slowly. The smoke hung in the air like a motionless hurricane. He coughed and said, I wanted to use a set over at RKM. They had just finished with Vampire's Kiss, and they had this gorgeous setter lab, a castle, interiors up the kazoo. Neil giggled. Interiors up the kazoo struck him as funny. With Landis, everything was up the kazoo. It must have cost a fortune, Landis continued. It was absolutely incredible. Well, you know me with finished sets. I just naturally started working on an idea. To me, it was like saving 2/3 of the production cost. I mean, the set is the movie. Pretty much. I couldn't let it go to waste. I heard they were going to do a Spanish production on it a few weeks later. All I needed was a script, so I called Neil and told him my idea. Then, for some reason which I'll never understand, RKM pulled the set out from under me, said I couldn't use it. They tore it down. Hoyt looked confused. They tore it down? What kind of an asshole thing is that to do? Landis shrugged. Hoyt cracked open a beer and whistled. No wonder they're losing money. That was like a free movie, and they wasted it. They didn't want me to have it, Landis replied. There are people over there who hate me, and they'd rather eat the set than let me use it. It's because of the kinds of movies I make. They think it's beneath them. Beneath them? Hoyt asked incredulously. That's a joke. Until the money comes in, Landis finished. Hoyt belched quietly, his voice smooth and resonant, befitting a leading man. Have you seen the shit they're putting out this fall? Christ, brazen teenage hussy and carnival girls ain't exactly gone with the wind, if you know what I mean. Landis smiled. Don't blame them. They're just doing what the stockholders tell them to do. Making trash? Landis nodded. Well, hell, we can make better trash than that, Hoyt said. It's true, Landis replied. I don't deny it. But someday they'll kiss your ass, Neil exclaimed. Damn right, Landis said. Someday they'll let me do what I really want. Give me a nice big budget, some decent distribution, a professional set, and I'll show those fuckers what I can do. Neil clapped. Bravo. Landis raised his hands. When that day comes, I'm going to stick it right back to 'em, where the sun don't shine. Our job is to survive in the meantime. We're all just paying our dues here. Eventually we'll get the shot. I'm going to earn respect at the only place they recognize, the box office. I'll make the greedy fuckers notice me. You see, working down here, at the bottom of the food chain, is a wonderful opportunity. I can really get creative and show some smarts. That's what this town is built on, people who make it up the ladder the hard way. I don't mind. When they make it harder for me, it just makes me tougher. So, fuck RKM. I'm making the movie anyway, on my own. That's when I got the idea to use the morgue. What about the interiors? Deborah asked. My house, Landis said slowly. I'll use my house. When Albert Beaumont kissed Devila, she tasted like brandy and cigarettes, sweet and bitter. She accepted his advance without hesitation. She opened her lips and let his tongue explore. Albert was consumed with the urge to excite her. After all, they were the most diabolical couple in Hollywood. He considered the anticipated publicity. Dating Devila would be the best move he'd ever made, and being linked publicly with her would be instant media credibility. His church would soon be on the map. After he filmed and demonstrated the conjuring of Satan, he'd be front-page news. With her by his side, he was sure to get more than his share of press. They were deliciously glamorous. She broke off the kiss and pushed him away, stirring his feelings more than she knew. He looked into her eyes, knowing what she would ask for before she opened her wine-colored lips. "Show me," she whispered. "Show me now." "Sure," he smiled. "No problem at all. Here, help me light these candles. I need enough to make a circle." They lit the candles together, placing them in holders a few inches apart to form a large circle, filling the room. In the center were the altar, the tuning forks, the sleeping cat, and Albert. He used his belt to tie the complacent cat to a hook embedded in the altar. He'd designed the slab to accommodate the ritual sacrifice of small animals. He then marked the cat's head with ashes. Without preamble, he struck the tuning forks so that the hard cloven hoof made contact with the tubular shanks. First one, letting it ring for a moment, then the other. They resonated together strangely, vibrating the inside of Devila's head as if she was standing inside a huge church bell. The two tones oscillated, ringing wildly. Albert watched the air around him. The candles flickered, and the forks began to blur. Devila stood dead still. The cat jumped at the sound and began to struggle against the bonds. The air in front of the tuning forks began to waver like heat rays radiating off a desert highway. The shimmering waves distorted the light passing through them. At the center of that distortion, a shape began to take form. Albert let the forks resonate, resisting the urge to strike them a second time. The shape became more distinct. It looked like a serpent, or rather, an apparition of a serpent, huge, with powerful-looking ghostly coils and a massive head. As they watched, the figure became more distinct. Roberta Bachman drank coffee. She sat in her Hollywood kitchen, the sun streaming through gauze curtains, and read the papers. Sputnik orbited overhead, and the world was no longer safe for democracy. The Reds were everywhere, same old shit. She got up from the peach-colored Formica tabletop and walked over to the percolator to pour another cup. Through her windows, LA looked bright and new. The smog had yet to settle across the basin, and traffic was still manageable. She knew all that would change soon. She switched on the radio. The disc jockey talked fast and bubbly, typical of the genre. He hawked his products and touted the radio station. He was one of the good guys in the white hats, and he said so every few minutes. Roberta let the coffee swirl in her cup, a rich brown-black liquid with aromatic steam coming off the top. She spooned in some half-half and stirred absently while she listened. "And it looks like rain is on the way," chirped the radio man. 80% chance of showers this weekend. So take your umbrellas, kids. Did you ever notice that when you take your umbrellas it never rains, and when you don't take 'em it pours? Well, on Saturday, I want all the good guy listeners to take their umbrellas with them everywhere they go. We'll chase those old rain clouds away, right, gang? Right, Roberta said in a sarcastic monotone. And now, here's Ozzie and Harriet's famous son, the irrepressible Ricky Nelson. I'm Walkin' came on the radio, and Roberta hummed along. She knew the Fats Domino version, unlike most other white listeners, and was mildly amused by Ricky's performance. Still, it had a nice groove, and it beat the hell out of Pat Boone. The phone rang. Roberta looked at the wall clock. 7:30. Who would call at that time? Janice was still asleep, and being the day after Halloween, neither one of them was going to work, even though it was only Friday. She turned the radio down and picked up the receiver. "Hello?" Roberta Bachman? Yes, who is it? The voice on the other end of the line was familiar, but she couldn't quite place it. She sat back down, her coffee in front of her. This is Landis Woodley, the voice said. Roberta's muscles stiffened at the sound of that name. Her voice took on a frigid flatness. Yes? There was a slight pause, then, I'm calling to apologize for last night. Apologize? Listen, Buster, that was a sick joke you pulled on us. You've got a lot of nerve calling me up this morning. I never want to hear from you again. I'm sorry, he said quickly. We didn't mean any harm, and I think Buzzy got carried away. That's right. Put the blame on him. You guys are all the same. Landis laughed. What? Hey, listen, lady. I just called to say I was sorry. Don't lump me in with Buzzy or anybody else. It's just that I saw your face, and I know how upset you were, and I just wanted to see if you were okay. Roberta took a sip of coffee and snorted. Humph. And where is your asshole friend this morning? How come you're calling and not him? Landis let his voice drop smoothly. Because I like you, and I didn't want to see you get hurt. Sometimes Buzzy gets a little overzealous. Last night he was drinking a bit much, and I was a little worried that he might... Might what? Try to rape me? Well, let me tell you, he never got a chance. And he never will. I think both of you are animals. You can tell Mr. Haller when he wakes up that I never want to see his ugly face again. Landis let a moment slip away, then said, What about me? Roberta was confused. What about you? Well, would you ever see my ugly face again? Roberta stopped. She hadn't expected Landis to say anything remotely like that. I don't know what you mean. I mean, if I asked you out, like for dinner, would you go? Roberta was flattered and at the same time disgusted. No, probably not, she said. Why not? Roberta's voice toughened. I don't know you, and what little I do know about you, I don't like. You and Buzzy are like two peas in a pod. I don't think I'd ever want to go out with either one of you. Landis sighed. Is that a no? Yes, that's a no. You're unbelievable, you know that? She hung up before he could answer. Davila gasped at the image of a huge snake Albert had conjured before her eyes. It wavered and thickened, then became more solid. There could be no doubt about it. What she was seeing was incredible, impossible. It frightened her. She took a step backward. The image began to move, its coils flexing and undulating. It hovered in the air above the cat, but its evil black eyes were fixed on Albert. Devila became aware that Albert was not moving. He seemed paralyzed. The snake floated toward him, relaxing its massive torso as it went. Devila screamed. The serpent slid around Albert. Devila backed up farther, knocking over several of the candles. Albert disappeared beneath the ghostly coils of the serpent demon. It wrapped around him until only the head of Albert Beaumont showed. Then, with a snap and a shifting of realities, Albert's head was gone. In its place, the head of the snake. Devila screamed again. The scales around the thing's mouth parted, and an evil grin seemed to grow. Its malicious eyes flashed at her, raping her. She stood transfixed as the two inhuman slits seemed to look right through her, into her soul, devouring it. She shuddered and shrank back. The scaly non-lips opened, and a black whip-like tongue darted out. Davila screamed again. The tongue shot out so quickly, so unexpectedly, that the burst of adrenaline she felt nearly shocked her into unconsciousness. It touched her face, the moist black tentacles of the forked tip caressing her pale skin. As lovers do, she needed to scream but didn't want to open her mouth lest the probing, quivering feeler find its way inside her. Instead, she made a piteous, high-pitched moaning sound. The black tongue darted in and out of the serpent's mouth sharply, as fast as lightning, emerging a split second later, wet with stinking saliva. It played with Devila, toying with her inability to scream and run. The tongue ran over her, leaving a snail's trail of iridescent slime wherever it touched. A few moments later, she was lathered from head to toe, her hair slick with the foul-smelling spit. She kept her mouth clamped shut tightly. The tears and reptile saliva burned her eyes. Fear exploded in her heart. At last the demon tongue withdrew, and the snake god pivoted its head to survey the room. Devila stayed absolutely still, afraid to move, yet shivering with revulsion. Albert, or what used to be Albert, dropped to his knees and began to crawl to the wall of candles. It stopped and extended a finger. The flame licked the tip, burning the flesh. The snake god withdrew the finger, now black and smoking, and looked at it quizzically. Its eyes fell back on Devila, then something popped. She found herself looking at Albert Beaumont again. It happened in the blink of an eye. The snake demon disappeared. The flames on the tips of the candles fluttered, as if the air had been disturbed, but Devila felt no breeze. Albert's eyes were glazed. He shuddered and felt his face with the palms of his hands. He looked at Devila, confusion in his features, and began to cry. 9. Jesus Christ, what a hangover! Landis looked at Buzzy with thinly veiled disgust. They sat drinking coffee on the deck overlooking Beechwood Canyon. From behind a pair of dark glasses, Buzzy groaned again. "The sun is killing me." Landis snapped open the newspaper and ignored his friend's suffering. "You're a fucking vampire," he said. "Oh, I think I must have pushed the old panic button a little too hard last night." "My eyes hurt. You deserve to suffer. You know it serves you right. You were an asshole last night. Hoyt Lovejoy punched you out, don't you remember?" Buzzy's hand came up to his face, felt the swelling under his eye and around his nose, then returned to the coffee mug. The sunglasses could not hide the damage. "Is that how I got this?" "I'm afraid so." Buzzy smiled, as if suddenly remembering something funny. "That guillotine trick was a knockout, huh?" Landis nodded, his eyes scanning the paper. He said nothing. He was searching the LA Times for any mention of his Halloween party. So far, to his dismay, he'd found none. Ignoring Buzzy was easy to do. He could hear the man's labored breathing behind the wall of newsprint. Landis's mood continued to sour. "It hurts to smile," Buzzy said softly. "Don't strain yourself," Landis replied, his tone dark. "Why are you so pissed off?" Landis put down his paper and leveled a gaze at Buzzy. "You really want to know? Okay, I'll tell you. I'm pissed off at you because—" He stopped, wondered if he was wasting his time, then continued slower, determined to make a point while Buzzy was still in pain. "Because of what you did to Roberta Bachman." "Roberta Bachman? Yeah, your date, don't you remember?" Buzzy pushed the sunglasses farther up his swollen nose, took a sip of black coffee, and grimaced. "She left screaming." "Exactly. So what's your point?" Landis shook his head. "The point is, I don't want you alienating people like that. That girl is a sweet young thing. You didn't have to scare the shit out of her so bad. Now she's going to go all around Hollywood and tell everybody what a bunch of assholes we are. Negative publicity we don't need, even if it's word of mouth." Buzzy squinted, mouth agape. "So?" Landis continued, "Yeah, that's what she's probably doing today. Listen to me, I love to scare people. That's my job, and I love shaking them up like we did last night. But I don't want people like her to run away crying. It creates ill will, and the only reason we're throwing these parties is to drum up some industry talk. We're in the horror movie business, remember?" Buzzy tilted his head, made a face, then leaned forward. His eyes locked with Landis's. "Hey, wait a minute. Have you got the hots for Roberta Bachman?" Landis stood up. "You're fucked up, you know that? I can't tell you anything." "Do you have the hots for Roberta Bachman?" Buzzy repeated slowly. "You never cared what people said before. In fact, you never gave a fuck about anybody. Now you're trying to tell me that you care what this little chick at RKM thinks. Don't try to shit me, man. I know you." Landis looked off into the city. Palm trees waved down on Franklin Avenue. Cars crawled along the major traffic routes. A few forlorn birds pirouetted in the sky. "You do, don't you?" Buzzy said. Landis didn't answer. "Look," Buzzy said, "I don't care if you take her out. After last night, she'll never talk to me again anyway, so you're welcome to her. It's just that you and me are brothers, man, and I want to know. I want the truth, that's all." Landis moved to the railing and lit a cigarette. He looked back at Buzzy's beaten face and smiled wickedly. Youth was still a part of him, and even though his hair had started to thin, he still had the heart of a little boy. There sparkled a mischievous energy in his smile. "I think she's kind of cute," he said. "I knew it. So the truth is out. You could have any girl in Hollywood, but you want this mousy little publicity girl from RKM. That makes zero sense, man." Landis's smile faded. "Well, you took her out." "Yeah, but you tried to talk me out of it," Buzzy said defensively. "You said I'd never get in her pants. I was right. Hey, I personally don't care if you take her out or not, okay? I just want you to level with me. Do you or do you not have the hots for Roberta Bachman? No trick answers, yes or no." "Yes." The sliding door slid open and Neil Bugmere stepped onto the deck, carrying a thick sheaf of papers. He wore a halter top and shorts, a pair of tan pumps, and a pair of cat's eye sunglasses that made him look like something from a Milton Berle comedy skit. His makeup appeared garish in the bright sun. The effect was surrealistic. Landis and Buzzy looked up and almost laughed. No matter how used to Neil's wardrobe preferences they became, they still had to stop themselves from making comments now and then. Neil sensed this and became indignant. The fresh fingernail polish glinted as he handed over the papers to Landis. "Here they are, all the latest changes." Buzzy rubbed his forehead. "Could you get me some aspirin?" he asked Neil. "I'm not your maid," Neil snapped, obviously as unhappy with Buzzy as Landis was today. "No, but you dress like her." "Fuck you," shouted Neil and lunged for Buzzy. For his size, Neil was an amazingly strong person. He'd always been athletic and kept himself in good shape. Unlike the perpetually whacked-out Buzzy, who was about as inclined to exercise as he was to volunteer for an IRS audit. Neil pulled him out of his chair and pinned him against the railing. Landis tried to pry Neil's hands loose, but the incensed transvestite would not give an inch. He pushed Buzzy's head back until it was hanging over the cliff, his upper body bent over the wooden rail. The red fingernails squeezed into his neck. "Hey!" Buzzy yelled. "Hey, let me go." "I've put up with your shit too long," screamed Neil. "I'm going to teach you a lesson you'll never forget." Landis wedged an arm between and tried to separate them, but Neil pushed him away. He released his right hand from its death grip on Buzzy's Adam's apple and slapped him hard across the face, aggravating the injuries he'd already suffered. The sunglasses were jarred off his head and spun out into the canyon, helicoptering down into the brush below. Beneath the shades, Buzzy's eyes were red and squinting, one of them already discolored in a classic shiner. He tried to turn away from the sun, but Neil held him tight. Buzzy yelped in pain. "Say you're sorry," demanded Neil. Buzzy looked at him with grim determination not to give in. Neil, not really waiting for an answer, slapped him again. This blow caused Buzzy to bark in pain. Landis considered trying to intervene again, but knew that it was useless. Neil was truly enraged and beyond Landis's control. He wondered if the tough little tranny was going to heave Buzzy over the side and put him out of his misery once and for all. "Say it," Buzzy coughed, making choking sounds. His eyes rolled back up into his head. "Say it, asshole," Neil demanded. "I'm sorry," Buzzy said softly. Neil released him and he slid back onto the terrace. Buzzy was embarrassed and his face throbbed. He looked over the edge to see if he could locate his sunglasses. They were nowhere to be seen. Neil glanced at Landis and said, "I'm ready to start whenever you are." Landis nodded. "Okay, let's work in the kitchen." Leaving Buzzy to his own hell on the terrace, Landis and Neil slipped back inside and sat down at the big kitchen table where Neil had set up his typewriter. Landis preferred to work in the kitchen rather than in an office. He could think with more clarity and had access to the coffee pot. The informal arrangement made for better decisions. "Let me see page 61, Landis asked. He read in silence, then looked up and said, "Could we read this together? I'll be Luboff and you be Tad Kingston. Take it from the top of page 60. The script was cool and crisp in his hand. Landis scanned the pages like a shark. Cadaver script by Landis Woodley and Neil Bugmere. Scene 41, N.T. Night. Ella County Morgue. Johnny confronts Dr. Ezekiel. "Johnny, I don't understand. These corpses are fresh. They haven't been prepared." "Doctor, that's just the way I want them, Johnny. You see, I have a special need for them, different from the medical college." "Johnny, doctor, I don't think I can do this." "Doctor, sure you can, Johnny. You want to be a medical doctor someday, don't you?" "Johnny, well, yes, I do." "Doctor, your mother would be very disappointed if you dropped out now, wouldn't she, Johnny?" "Johnny, yes, Dr. Ezekiel." "Doctor, bring me that cadaver over there and remove the sheet. I want to examine its organs to see if they're suitable for my purposes." Johnny goes over to the corpse, pulls back the sheet, and gasps. It is the body of his best friend, Nick Garbo. Johnny drops the sheet back onto the cadaver. "Doctor." "What is it, Johnny? Somebody you know?" "Johnny, doctor, it's Nick. He's dead." "Doctor." "Of course he's dead, Johnny. That's how you get in here. But don't worry, we'll give him a nice clean dissection." Johnny. "No, you can't. It's insane." "Doctor, insane? You call me insane?" That's what they said back in Vienna when I told them I could transplant live organs from one body to another. They said I was mad. Mad? But who's to say what madness is? Certainly not the doctors. They condemn me, but they have no right. It is I who should condemn them. I am not insane. I have never been insane. Behind Johnny, covered with a sheet on the slab, the body begins to rise up. The sheet falls away to reveal the hideous dead face of Nick. It sits up, swings its legs over the side, and stands. Johnny and the doctor turn around and see it shuffling toward them. Johnny. "It can't be. Doctor, get back. Get back, I say." The corpse lurches forward. Johnny stumbles, trying to escape. "Doctor." "Something has caused it to reanimate. If I could just—" Johnny screams. The corpse reaches out and strangles Johnny while the doctor looks on, fascinated by the reanimated cadaver. The cadaver kills Johnny and turns to the doctor. "Okay, hold it right there, Neil. This is where I want it changed," said Landis, breaking character. "Changed?" Neil asked. "Yeah, I can't kill Tad Kingston this early in the movie. It's gonna hurt the door." Neil ran his hands through his hair. "It's halfway through at this point. I think you're free to kill him off if you want." Landis smiled. "No, I want him to live." "Look, Neil, there's two reasons for it. One is I'm paying that chump Kingston enough money where he should be in every fucking scene. And 2 is, if he dies halfway through, the teenagers will be turned off. Believe it or not, Tad draws the kids into the theaters. If the word gets out that he dies halfway through, the door goes down. Neil stared at the page in his hands. You can't be serious. I wrote this scene exactly the way you asked me to. Kingston dies, the sheriff gets suspicious and comes after the doctor. It's a crucial plot point. How else is the sheriff going to start investigating the doctor? Exasperation colored his voice. On certain words, he sounded almost whiny. Landis let him finish and waved his hand in the air as if shooing away a fly. Nope, that's not going to work. We'll have to change it. But, no buts. Change it. Neil looked dejected, as if he'd been chastised by the teacher in front of the whole class. Landis caught his look and said, "Let me explain something to you, Neil. You never kill the hero, and in this movie, Tad's the hero. It turns people off. Now, if you heard me say that, it must have been a misunderstanding, because I never ever kill the hero. It gives people hope. It makes them feel good about themselves, at least for the first 70 minutes. Neil laughed. This is a movie about cadavers, dead bodies. It's not Rebel Without a Cause, and that's Tad Kingston up there on the screen, not James Dean. Nobody's going to give a shit if he dies. Landis looked at Neil, his eyebrow cocked. Not true to a teenager. You judge an actor by his hair, and I know for a fact that Tad's hair is better than James Dean's. I've surveyed it. Landis paused, then frowned. Why are you arguing with me? That's not like you, Neil. This script has got my name on it too, you know. Landis raised his voice. Hey, I don't give a fuck if it's Ernest Hemingway's name. This is my movie, and what I say goes. Neil became quiet. His head bowed slightly, and he let the page drop from his fingers. Landis put his hand on Neil's shoulder and said, "What's the problem, Neil?" Neil looked at Landis. "I don't know," he mumbled. "It's Buzzy and Luboff. They're so screwed up, and they're trying to take us down with them. It makes me mad, I guess. I want this movie to make it. Then I see those two doing their best to fuck everything up, and it makes me mad that you just let it happen." Landis leaned back and scratched his head. He had a precious expression on his face, one that Neil had never seen before. Bemused, a little beatific around the edges. "Cool it, Neil. I know what I'm doing. This movie is going to be just fine. As far as the goon squad goes." He hooked his thumb back in the direction of the sliding doors. "Let me deal with them, and you just worry about the rewrites." Neil shook his head. "I don't know. You're a damn good writer, Neil, but nobody will hire you 'cause you dress like a woman." "But I did, didn't I? The way you dress don't mean shit to me. You're fast and you're affordable. Notice I didn't say cheap, and I value your work. You could clean up in this town, but you're a goddamn fruitcake. Was that a conscious decision?" He paused, not expecting an answer, then forged ahead. "You could get a crew cut, wear a grey suit, loss butt, and wind up working for Walt Disney if you wanted. I'm the only one who hires you the way you are, fishnet stockings and all." He grinned. Neil did too. "Now Buzzy is the same way, except he's an asshole, and Luboff's a junkie. What can I do about it? Each one contributes what they can in their own way. I try to give them all a chance. Can you dig that?" Neil nodded. "Yeah, I can dig it." "Okay then, let's get to work. I have a million changes I want to make in this script, starting with Tad not getting killed." Behind them, the sound of the sliding door opening caught their attention. Buzzy re-entered the house. Neil turned around just in time to see Buzzy walk into the kitchen. He tensed, preparing himself for another fight. Buzzy walked toward him, a hangdog expression still dripping off his face. Neil started to speak. "If you're here to..." Buzzy cut him off. "I'm here to apologize, man." Nobody spoke for a moment. Buzzy stood there, his hair askew. The black eye looked painful. Buzzy's voice rumbled, the vocal cords burned by